Now, I don't know of any declarations of interest here. Stage, no. Any public forum, petitions, deputations? No. Confirmation of minutes, if someone can confirm the minutes of the last meeting, the 23rd of September, that they're accurate. Anybody want to move that? David?
Yeah, I can do that.
And Lloyd, you're a seconder.
Yeah, I'll look.
Any discussion there? All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Notification of extraordinary and urgent business. I don't know. Any questions? No.
Mr. Chairman, there is a question that you and I have talked about, and that is about our work program. So I'm not sure it's appropriate here or not, but there are some matters that are sitting out there that we need some forward movement on without getting into detail.
Right. Do you want to bring it up later on in the general or what?
It's up to you.
We could, yeah.
We can even progress it outside of the meeting, but there's some issues around Waituna White Pine Trust, reserves, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, could we, well, when we're looking at the budgets on the lease land reserves, and you want to,
yep, okay,
around that a wee bit?
That's fine.
You'll bring it up then.
Thank you.
Any chairman? I don't have any reports, but councillor reports? No, it's all good. Right. We'll go into number 9, item 1. And
Mr. Chairman, maybe it's appropriate that we did have a field day down at White Pine Trust, run by the Whakamanatia Waituna Trust, and quite a number of ES staff there to support that work. That field day, looking at structures around sediment capture and planting, riparian planting, which was very interesting. I believe there's a report being done about that. It might be quite good for that to be circulated in a minute for noting. Paul might be able to update us a little bit more on that progress, or Fiona.
I'll let Fiona do that update. I think she's a bit closer to the detail than me.
Okay, Fiona.
Happy. So through you, Mr. Chairman, we did have a very successful field day held by Whakamanatia Waituna, centred around the work in the lower Waituna Creek as part of the project, the restoration work that's been underway there. And then we moved over to a property across in the lower part of the catchment and looked at the peak runoff control structures that have been put in place. There's 2 trials underway there. So we are gathering together feedback and insights from that day that we'll summarise into a short report, just with what went well, what we learned, and things to do differently for next time. So it's a really important opportunity though to look at some of the actions in place. And what farmers can do, what people can do on their properties and the different options. Happy to take questions.
Got any questions? Lloyd and then Peter. You're mute, Lloyd. Push the button.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I went along. It was interesting. It was a good day, good opportunity to meet people. Pity there wasn't a bit more water flowing, or we could have actually seen the structures in action, but it was pretty radical change from the usual thing that you might have seen 10, 15 years ago. So interesting stuff.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Fiona, so we're talking, that comment you just made was around land that we administer at that lower end. My Facebook feed come up a while ago with the activists' aerial photography of environment Southland land with cows grazing and water everywhere. We're quite comfortable that we're taking having those difficult conversations with all our lessees. Is that correct about the way they need to be managing stuff? How confident are you of that?
So if I can just clarify through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor McDonald, you're referring to lower Waituna Creek?
Not exactly sure, but in the lower Mataura.
There's two issues there, Mr. Chairman. One is that the field day was not on our own land. It was actually on dock land and on a private enterprise land. The matter that Peter's referring to is something quite different.
So if I can just comment through you, Mr. Chair, just something that we'd be happy to report back to this committee on. But what I can say is there's a complex range of land ownership in that space, and there's an active conversation that I'm participating in next week around some of the challenges there. So certainly that's an ongoing and live discussion.
Thank you.
Have we actually had that confirmed? Obviously, there was some photos sent.
Yes, correct.
I take it, are they confirmed that it is our land?
No, there's as I say, I'm not sure that it's in fact our land. I think there are other landowners involved, but certainly we're pursuing that discussion and that's going quite constructively. Yeah, so definitely a topic in hand at the moment.
Yeah, let's find a way to give an update on that issue, and we can deal with that outside of the committee. But also, let's give you in the not too distant future an update on our land in general and how things. Yeah. We can take that as an action away to come back to it.
I hope you didn't mind me bringing that up. I'm just always concerned about that reputational risk, of course. So
absolutely understand it. Yeah.
I can just ask, Nico, are you all sorted, or you've got two?
I'm going to fix a problem.
Yeah, you need to turn one off or turn your mutes off if that's able to. Okay, so there's no other reports. That's everybody's happy with that. We'll move on otherwise. So we'll head back to number 9, item 1, and the proposed Southland Riparian Restoration Project. Are you leading this, Fiona?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a very, very short presentation that I'll pop up. Am I able to share screen? I'm probably.
Could be able.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there we go. So everyone can see the screen okay?
Yep.
Great, thank you. So I will take the report as read. Councillors will note that there's a couple of recommendations at the start there just to really signal our ability to be able to move forward on this project. Councillors will also recall that this has been a project that has been discussed for some time, and I know there has been some enthusiasm to make progress. So just very briefly, the Southland Riparian Restoration Program or Action Program, and apologies for the date there. Obviously, that it's really important, this piece of work, in the context of the work we do around engaging, educating and empowering our community. We see this as a key program, a key deliverable. We think it supports the other work that needs to happen across the region in terms of our regulatory obligations. And so it also supports some of the biodiversity work that's going on as well. So biodiversity and both water have been huge beneficiaries. In terms of the program, again, this is by and large outlined in the report, but essentially our team will work to deliver riparian action plans and monitor the implementation. Just a comment that we know that putting trees in the ground is only the start of improving our riparian buffers. There's a longer term program of replacement of trees, but also of spraying and maintenance that's absolutely required for this to be a success, and we intend to kind of be able to follow that process. Our key role will also be around coordinating and preparing contracts between farmers and nurseries. And again, that's a real strength that we've seen from this initiative in other regions, is that ability that we have as an organisation to be involved in that work. I think it's important to note, although riparian planting is incredibly important, it's not the only thing that needs to happen on our Southland farms, or that is happening already on our Southland farms. So the opportunity to open up the conversation around other interventions is really important. And of course, we've just touched on one with the Waituna Field Day discussion, whereby we were looking at the peak runoff control structures. But also we know, for example, that there is a significant number of critical source areas flow into our waterways. So, working with farmers to ensure that there are interventions in place to manage overland flow in those areas, I think is really important. And the element of it that I guess is we need to explore and better understand is around cultural and community monitoring. And I suppose that's taking us beyond the nuts and bolts of how many trees in the ground and what area and how many landowners to actually, are we achieving the outcomes for a region that we want to? Are we improving access to the waterways and considering access? Are we thinking about mahinga kai in terms of the planting and biodiversity? Just a quick opportunity, benefits there. I won't probably speak too much to that because I've probably touched on that, but we do see significant benefits from implementing a project of this nature. And again, I suppose in some ways, stating the obvious, working in with farmers and farmer contribution is absolutely essential to this program. We'll need to work closely with farmers, build relationships, utilise the skills that we have in-house to achieve the outcomes here. The idea of planting and ordering in bulk is really important and allows us to hopefully then gain benefits over time in terms of cost savings that we can pass on to farmers. And you'll see one of the recommendations within my report is to allow us to facilitate that ordering by underwriting the cost of that. So we expect that farmers will be making up the cost of purchasing the plants and doing the planting themselves. But in order for us to be able to gain those benefits, we want to be able to do that ordering at scale. We need to look for barriers to farmers planting in riparian areas, and we know some of those are mindset related. We know some of them are regulatory related, and they're both important considerations to try and open the door for more of this work to be happening. And it relates not just to riparian planting, of course, there are a wide range of activities. And again, just that need to work at scale. And I won't go into any detail, but just, we councillors will recall we've been working in the Charlton Waimumu area, and just really the slide is to emphasise that we actually have significant infrastructure, if you like, in place within the organisation to proceed with this project. That's come about because of our Charlton Waimumu work, but also because of the work that we have done previously in developing farm environmental plans with the landowners. So we have a significant GIS resource. We have the ability to manage data in terms of who and where, and to be able to report on that really effectively, which I think is really positive. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Fiona. It's certainly we've got to try and help, and if we can promote. I know there's a number of have talked about in the past trying to get more trees growing or seedlings, getting the system going, and obviously around the Gore area working with Hokanui, Runanga, and certainly we've got to support this, and this seems a good way to do it. Now, is anybody, David and then Lloyd?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. No, it's a great program, Fiona. I think it's absolutely marvellous. Just looking forward, shelter belts, and they do have quite an effect on certainly overland flow and that sort of thing, and stock movement. Is there a likelihood that that will become part of the program at all in future? Because you'd probably have to look at different plantings, possibly beech and ribbonwood and some of those other tree types. But no, is there an opportunity in the future to actually move into the shelter belt area at all?
Absolutely, I think there is, Councillor Stevens, and I think that's something I've been quite conscious of, particularly as a lot of our existing shelter belts, particularly those ones across Northern Southland and across the Clinton area through to Clinton, start to become older. The macrocarpus that are up to sort of 25, 30 years are becoming unwieldy and are needing to be removed. And, the reason for their existence, in my view, still exists. And so I think there's a real opportunity there to develop the program once we get underway with the initial framework.
Thanks, Fiona.
Wood, and then Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fiona, you're aware as I am that putting a tree in the ground is one thing, but maintaining and looking after it for the next 2 to 3 years while it gets up to a size where it doesn't need that has been difficult in some areas, and especially with some contractors. Have we got that sorted, or is this all voluntary work in this area?
So for the wider program, it's our intention that the farmers are responsible for that. Certainly we'll have agreements in place and we'll be doing that monitoring, as I indicated, because as you're absolutely right, tree and ground is one thing, but certainly making sure that we look after those trees over the next 3 to 4 years while they get established. So no, absolutely, that's something that we've got on our radar, and we'll have a program in place to make sure that we deliver on that.
Can I just follow on there, Mr. Chairman? We thought we could do it ourselves on our own property, but we actually ended up spraying it with the wrong thing and killed the trees. And we run out of time, and it's always done as a leftover job. I think the care and maintenance needs to be thought about very carefully. Even if we had a Pacific team that did that, it is a specialist field in its own right. I think if we're going to look after that investment in the ground.
Yes, no, certainly agree. One of the things actually that we have learnt from Charlton Waimumu, and it's not particularly complex in its nature, but ensuring that we don't, can I say, overplant. So one of the experiences we've had is just actually, constraining the number of trees that go in per year, so that we actually have a program that is sustainable for farmers to look after, and that's, as I say, it's in its simplicity, but nonetheless a really key issue to make sure that we're able to achieve those outcomes. And you're right, we can explore the idea of teams, but what we're wanting to do is empower farmers to be able to, put these in and then to be able to take care of the plants as time goes by. So ensuring that sustainability means not overloading farmers with a maintenance program that's just not going to fit their kind of annual plan.
Agree.
Mute off, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter and then Lloyd Esler.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Fiona, fantastic concept and idea from that mountains to the sea, that sort of corridors type thinking. Really great idea. And we've talked about it for a while, haven't we? But it seems as though we're underway. Just a couple of points. I'm a bit concerned about having one preferred supplier. Does that have some risk in it? Because that leads on to, we have to give the nurseries certainty. They have to be able to see a future. And I just wonder, if we do all this work at the back end, we don't give the nurseries certainty, like a 10-year window of certainty, that it might all fall over. So I think a lot of work needs to go on the front end. And my last point is that there are significant opportunities through the emissions trading scheme to incentivise this program. And once people can see $1 in it, that will drive the preferred behaviour. So a lot of people throw their arms up and you go, oh, that's just a load of rubbish, or that won't work. But I'm actually seeing, going on farms now and seeing people that used to put their fences at the bottom of the gullies and put in a small strip, putting their fences at the top.
Nice.
Putting in those areas that are over a hectare. So I'm thinking of really critical advice around that can set you up for those opportunities in the future, as opposed to getting 5 years down the track and saying, oh, if I only knew that, we would have done this. So there could be a role for the council to facilitate discussions between some of those forestry professionals with landowners too. So yeah, just a couple of ideas, but overall, fantastic direction.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of quick comments on that. Just your final comments around the opportunities in emissions trading, I think those are very real. I'm conscious of the scale needed to be able to, ensure that people are then eligible for credits. So, and certainly we've upskilled some of our team to have, not to advise on that in a business sense, but to have knowledge of how that system works. So I certainly, it's not a priority for the start of the program, but certainly something that we've signalled we're aware of and looking to see how we can work in that space and provide advice and support in that space. In terms of the preferred supplier, I just want to be quite clear there. Our recommendation is based on using a single supplier for the first 3 years of the program only. That allows us a chance to get the program established, but we would then be intending, and there are other benefits actually from from our approach there. But we would be intending over the next 3 years to be engaging in a procurement process, which then opens up the opportunity for other nurseries to be involved in this program after year 3, and also has the benefit that allows them lead in time to be able to prepare for the plants, because we know these things, plants don't kind of grow overnight. So we want to be able to allow that longer term kind of management by nurseries to happen. But as I say, the first 3 years we're looking at a single supplier, just to allow us to establish the program and to go through that procurement process.
Thanks, Fiona. Lloyd, Esther, and then
Yeah,
Nicole.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're just reinforcing that idea that the follow-up is very important, and particularly with drought conditions, that it includes watering as well as weeding. And I saw another example the other day where a school planting, somebody had trimmed it up with a weed whacker, which smashes up the rabbit guards and it ringbarks the trees. So as long as we're telling people to keep the weed whacker well away from young plantings, because the bark is not whacker proof.
No, absolutely. We take that on board, and it is it's one of those things we're involving our communications team, I think, will be essential, because we want to how do we work with people to ensure the most clearest messaging is conveyed in this area, because even having been through some of the planting that's been done the last 2 years, we've had 1 or 2 things where it hasn't quite worked out as we'd hoped. But again, clear messaging and signalling to people, and that regular reminder and contact will be super essential.
Thanks for that. Nicole?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm very excited to see that we're actually finally going out to with a tender. We've been talking about the Taranaki program for some time, and I know we had to do the preliminary work, which has been really good in that sort of Gore Mataura area. But to be out, it's a real no-brainer that if we can bulk buy plants, pass them on at costs, we're going to get more on the ground. And I don't know how we do it. We can't be favouring one company over another, but actually encouraging farmers who aren't perhaps that tree savvy to hire somebody to maybe even plant and maintain, because as pointed out, those first year or two with natives are pretty important as far as survivability. And let's hope we might have a government that may put a bit more flexibility into the width of ETS plantings going forward, and that would give it another boost. So really excited to see this thing starting to take shape and be able to roll out the stuff. So great work, team. So that's good.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Well, I think especially with Hei Waka Kanoa and all this that's going on with emissions trading, so it's certainly only going to be a growing area. We certainly need to support that. Lyndall and then Paul.
Kia ora, I just wanted to apologise for my lateness, Chairman, and to extend our personal tēnā korua to Gail and Estelle.
Paul?
Just kia ora. Just Fiona, I don't know whether it's too early, but the opportunity for growth in terms of scalability of, it's a reasonable amount of money, but doable. Is there any comments on the scalability of it as we progress over the next 5 years?
Oh, no, certainly. Through you, Chair, Paul, we'd be very keen to see this program increase in scale. And I think councillors today have touched on a couple of areas, both where we could improve, and that's the shelter belts and also the opportunities that are around emissions trading. But certainly the opportunity to, increase either the number of farmers. Now there'll be obviously some challenges with that because we'll need to resource up internally to be able to deliver, but also the number of plants. And again, we're very keen at this early stage to maintain a more sort of a smaller number of plants per property, or recommend that. But there's absolutely no reason why, as infrastructure increases and interest and awareness increases, that those numbers can't increase. So, no, absolutely.
Thanks, Fiona. And yeah, Nicole, can you turn your thing down again, please?
Right, I might have to leave. I thought Teams might be compatible, but it's not. So I'll have to leave this one.
That's all good. If we've got no more, we'll carry on. Were you waving, Lloyd, or?
Yeah, can I just pick up on the second recommendation? Can I get some clarification? It looks like there's a $55,000 cost here through the rate. Can you just see, because is this for 1 year or is this for 3 years? Can you just explain a little bit more about the financial side of this, please?
Absolutely. So in order to be able to purchase the plants, which Regional Council will do in working with the nursery, we need to have the money available, and that cost will need to be met prior to necessarily the farmers supplying, paying the money back into the organisation. So it is an underwriting of that cost. It's intended that we will get all of that money back as the plants go out to the farmers. And so it's a short term, and it is, yes, you make a good point. It is per year for the first 3 years. And as Paul's indicated, if we extend the program, then potentially that cost would extend further.
Just on that, we're underwriting it. Is that saying that we in regards to the farmers might come up with the goods anyway, but we're just guaranteeing it?
Correct. That's right. It's just to be really clear, it's intended that and Regional Council are doing administration and delivering the services and the expertise around planning riparian areas and the monitoring. The actual purchase and delivery of the services is intended to be at the farmer's cost.
But now, if we haven't got it, we'll move on. We've had a good discussion there, and it's a great idea. So there's 2 recommendations there. Does someone want to move both those recommendations? David, and someone seconder. Lyndall, all in favour, say aye.
All right.
Hands up. That's good. Against, will carry. Very good. Thank you. I'll move on to item 2. Raymond, is Raymond going to be talking to us in regards to the schedule for the liaison service committees meeting?
Yep, I think Raymond's online.
Oh, welcome.
Right here, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, all good.
Not much to add from my perspective, Chair. Happy to take the item as read.
Anybody got any questions in regards to the meeting times and bits and pieces or anything? Lloyd?
It's not necessarily, Mr. Chairman, on the meeting times. They seem okay and they follow a normal process, a little bit later than normal, I think, but that's fine. But there's going to be some questions come up, and I want to make sure that we've got answers to those questions. And it's specifically around some of the Waituna stuff. There's been a targeted rate raised down there, but there's been no action on the ground. So there's a number of things there will need to be answered. RETI will need to be clear about reserves and reserve levels and staffing and those sorts of things. There's a number of questions that we know will come up from the different groups. Tiana will be around the gravel on the road, gravel building up on the bridge. So, we need to be ahead of the game here. So have we got that covered off is really my question.
I've talked with Paul and Raymond about in regards to checking through the minutes and seeing have we done what we've said, and just to then clarify some of those work jobs. We also, I think they're reviewing, Fiona, in regards to how the budgets look and how it's sort of laid out. It was always just checking off some of those things that I can remember, and just so hopefully we'll have the answers. That's what we've done. Paul, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very sensible comment from Councillor McCallum to just make sure that we've got answers for what we expect to get questions on, and just to do a bit of a check-in. What I'll do as an action point is to maybe check in with the chair around how we give you the committee some assurances that we'll come to these meetings prepared. So yeah, it's a good point, and stuff that I'll come back to you on.
Macquarie will be one too, as you know, Jeremy, that we'll need to be over the top of.
I take it we don't have a chair there yet. It's running without a chair. There was no chair put in last year.
I think that's correct, Chair, yeah.
But if that's the case, who's going to chair that meeting? Will it be one of us?
I think we take over and through a nomination. If there's no nominations, and I suppose we can run the meeting on their behalf. Is that correct?
We can double check the protocol ahead of that. So I might ask Fiona if she can she'd be able to confirm that and come back. But I think that would be the case.
Good.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
David.
As the constituency councillor might be quite good for that.
Yep. We'll take that on board. David?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This really just regards a letter we received from the chair of the Mataura Liaison Group. Hopefully we'll get that sorted out prior to the meeting. There's obviously a few issues there. I'm not quite sure how serious they are, but no, we need to get that sorted and either get a response prior to, which would be better, I think, than at the meeting, just to sort that out. Thanks.
Lyndall?
Yeah.
Sorry. No,
I'm just going to say, noting that, and I'm sure there will be. Yeah.
Yep.
Lyndall?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. All points that I was going to raise, but also would like to suggest that the agendas reflect the individual nature of each meeting, and therefore cover off some of those site-specific issues rather than just being kind of a general agenda that goes right across. I think each area's got its own unique, each committee's got its own unique concerns. So I think having the agendas out early to the chairs, because that's often something that they comment on,
Yes.
and having them slightly more individualised might be helpful.
Thanks, Lyndall. And I was going to add, yes, getting the agendas out there in plenty of time is always not the Friday before the Monday meeting.
Appreciate that that's not the only thing that staff have to do, but
I know,
but you get the message.
Yep.
And a follow-up phone call would be handy too, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. No, we'll duly note all that, Paul, and talk about that. No, that's all good. So anyway, we're finished through. It's just to move to recommend. Yep. Thank you, Lloyd, and seconder. Come on, Wade. Lloyd, the two Lloyds, all in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. All good. All right, on to item 3. Biosecurity, Biodiversity Operations Division update. Is Ellie? Yes, she is there. Kia ora, Ellie.
Kia ora, everyone. So we just wanted to take the opportunity to update you a little bit on the RPMP and some of the key projects. I think we've been providing a lot of updates on Jobs for Nature over the last year, so we thought it'd be good to just talk a little bit more in detail about some of the key projects. We don't have time to go into all of the RPMP in detail, so the team have picked out some key projects that they think you'll be particularly interested in, or ones that you haven't heard about before, but keen to answer any questions. Dave and Jolie are going to do the presentation for you, so we're going to try and do a 3-way shit. I'm going to try and control the PowerPoint, so we'll see how that goes. But I think everybody knows Dave. Dave's been with us for a while, managing the Animal Pest Program and an expert in all things animal pests. But you may not have met Jolie. So Jolie is our new team leader for pest plants. She's been with us for about 10 months now and taken on all parts of the RPMP and wild and conifers and all things plant related. So this is her first time presenting at Regional Services, but I'm sure you'll make her welcome. So I will just share my screen and pass over to Dave.
Oh, kia ora, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks, Ellie, for introducing me as probably sounding old. Don't know, you didn't mean to. But yeah, thanks to the Regional Services Committee and the exec for the opportunity to give a quick presentation on pest animals. It's been a while since we probably sat in front of you and did it this way, and particularly in regards to the PCA program that I'll mainly touch on. I'd also like to acknowledge the staff that work behind in biosecurity, pest animals. So Alfredo, Raul and Caitlin, just thanks to them for the effort that they put in to make our programs run and do a lot of liaising with the farmers, which is vitally important. So big shout out to them. Next slide, thanks, Ali. What I'm going to talk about is the Possum Control Areas Program, and I'll commonly refer to it as PCA. So just a quick background of history to why we have this program. It all came about really as a result of the bovine TB vector control program that ran from the early 90s through till 2008 that the council was heavily involved in. Now, that was a highly successful program. We went from a high of 55 herds in the mid-90s with TB down to 0 by the time we finished being involved directly in that program in 2008. So very successful, very well done for the council and all involved and the farmers. The downside of being so successful was that once TB was eradicated or the risk was removed, then no possum control happened in an area. So in the early 2000s, we started to see a lot of areas drop off the program, and we started to scratch our heads, the councillors did, and also the farmers did all at the same time, going, what's going to happen? And possums will breed. So the natural was going to happen. Things were going to turn to custard. So we quickly looked at the options, and one of the options was do nothing, let possums build up, leave it to the landowner responsibility, which is what our RPMP states, or we could assist farmers to do that responsibility. So we focused on a couple of programs in the North Island, Hawke's Bay and Taranaki, that were already up and running quite successfully, and we ended up basically copying Hawke's Bay's possum control program with some minor changes to suit ourselves. So it's very much about landowner responsibility, but at the same time, we're here to assist and coordinate that possum control. So it's not only one farmer doing something, it's all his neighbours in an area doing something at the same time. That's why it gets a lot more benefit, because it's a coordinated approach. So we, as I'll touch on in a minute, we coordinate the initial possum control. And the idea of that is that means that all farmers within a PCA area start on the same playing field, same level with their possum densities. And we then turn it over to the farmers to be responsible. So as the wee cartoon at the side there illustrates, there's carrots and there's a stick. Obviously, we like to use the carrot and the education and the advice as much as we can. But at the end of the day, we do have the stick if we need it from a regulatory point of view. And obviously, we monitor the program, which I'll touch on again shortly as well. Slide, thanks. So as I mentioned, we need carrots to get the program going properly. And one of the biggest carrots was that council provide the initial control in a PCA. So a PCA ranges from 6,500 hectares up to about 13,000 hectares is their biggest, and I'll show a map shortly, but that can have anywhere from half a dozen farmers to 106 farmers in a PCA. So it does take quite a bit of time for staff to go out and see each farmer one-on-one. We need to do it that way because we need to sell what the program is and what the benefits are, what council can do and what's expected of the farmers. So once we get that done, it generally takes 2 or 3 months to do the initial control at council cost. And again, that means the possum population is down to a low level for the farmers to manage there going forward. So we use a range of control methods. As you see, there's toxins on the screen there and a variety of traps, and we basically do it all through the use of contractors, approved pest contractors to the council. And then we monitor that result, and we can pass that over to the farmer saying, here's the result. It's below the 5% residual trap catch. It's now up for you to manage. Next slide, thanks. The other big carrot, or the other big incentive, is the bait station setup. As part of that initial control that I just talked about, we set up bait stations for the farmers that want it. Now, it's not something they have to have. It's just a strong recommendation by staff that this is a highly effective and efficient way of doing things. So the contractor set up the bait station. The guy on the right there, left, is GPSing that into a phone app. And in the middle, you've got the bait station in the background behind a fenced-off area, so the stock can't get it. Or the bait station on the right is one up a high tree. It's a high set, so stock, again, don't have access to it. Currently, we've got over 18,000 bait stations spread out throughout the PCA, and most of them used at least once a year. It's really up to the farmer whether he does it at least once a year, or some do it several times of the year. It just depends on the habitat or the possum numbers, possum densities that they have. The first 2 or 3 years of putting out those bait stations, it's probably 10 to 12 years ago now. So we're just in the phase of having to replace on a rotational basis quite a few of those bait stations, because being plastic, as you can imagine, the Southland climate, they do get a bit brittle, frost and then sun, frost and then sun. So, but they have lasted fairly well. Slide, thanks. So once we do that initial control and set the farmers up with a control plan for their property, it then goes into what we call the maintenance. So the annual possum maintenance, again, we do like to see them do it once a year, but some farmers are quite happy or they need to do it more than once a year. So we coordinate that annual maintenance. They'll get a letter in the mail saying, hey, it's time to do something. And again, it's that coordinated approach where it's not just targeting one farmer, it's targeting all the farmers in the area. So they're all encouraged to do something over a 3-month period. And that gives a greater benefit to them in the program. So on the left there, you've got a farmer can do it himself, where we supply the bait. That bait's at cost, so we don't put any markup or anything on it. So it's cheaper than what they can get at farmlands, but they can go buy their own if they want. Otherwise, what we do try and push and promote very heavily is the one on the right there is a contractor doing the job. And as Councillor McCullum pointed out regarding riparian maintenance, possum control is exactly the same. It's an expertise. It may sound easy to do, but it's better left to the experts. So a lot of farmers are using the contractor, which is good. And some equally, they do it themselves. It just means that we do a wee bit more auditing and monitoring on those farmers that are doing it themselves. But again, it's that coordinated approach between staff, farmers and contractors. So on an annual basis, as I say, a farmer will get a letter saying it's time to do something. He may get a visit from the contractor. He'll get possibly a visit from the ES staff member. But whether it's a contractor or ES staff, that gives the opportunity to discuss going back to square one and discussing why we're doing it, how we're doing it, just covering off best practice, checking that they're doing best practice, a whole lot of things like that. So that face-to-face contact or over the phone contact, whatever it is, it's quite important on an annual basis. Slide, thanks. As with any program, you've got to monitor it. So as the number of PCAs increases, obviously we try and increase the monitoring. There's a couple of nationally recognised methods of monitoring on the left and in the middle. The left is residual trap catch, where we use leg hold traps, and the number of possums caught in those traps is expressed as a percentage. I won't go into too much more detail on that, it gets a bit scientific. But if you had 100 trap nights, the target is at the moment 5% residual, so no more than 5 possums caught on those 100 trap nights. The other method of monitoring we've got is a wax tag. Just putting up the pictures there in case you do come across them in your travels or comms stuff. So the wax tag is, the orange bit is just a plastic device that is nailed onto a tree or a post, and the white blob at the bottom is a wax block, and the possum comes along and bites into that, and it just gives us a presence and absence. The picture on the right is just, it's not a scientific method by any means, but it's just when staff go out into the field, they know what to look for in terms of possum sign. So that illustration there is just possum damage to a tree. Obviously, we look at for possum poo on the ground around gateways, hay sheds, anywhere like that, and that just gives them an idea of what possums are around as well. Anecdotally, we get evidence for feedback from farmers, which is very important to us. Possums around the house, farmers and their farmers' wives are pretty keen to tell us whether the roses are doing well or not doing well that year. Possums love roses, so that's always a good indication of how the program's going as well. And crudely, another way of telling is how many possums are squashed on the road. When the possum levels start to get up a bit, you certainly notice them squashed on the road a bit more. So yeah, a crude, non-scientific way of monitoring, but it all adds up to help tell us how the program's going. Slide, thanks, Ellie. So where are we at the moment? Sorry if that map's a bit small in scale, but your blue line there is the Otago Southland boundary. You should recognise the rest of the features. We currently have 56 PCA projects, which is those individual red areas, and that covers about 374,000 or 374,500 hectares. So quite a lot of area is involved in the PCA program, and that also includes around about 2,000 properties. It's not 2,000 individual farmers, but 2,000 properties. But the time you take in the farm owner, the share milker, the manager, the workers, we really are getting out there to a lot of people on this program. But having said that, it's not just talking about possums either. We do get a lot of times where we rock up to a farmer on the phone and they want to talk about water quality, riparian planting, councillors, a whole range of things. So yeah, quite important that we sort of jack of all trades, I suppose you can call it. What I could have put on there, was probably the TB boundary. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but the TB program that I talked about, it was actually covering 1 million hectares of Southland when it was up and running. So yes, we've done well to get 374,000 in, but there's still several 100,000 hectares in Southland that's not getting any formal possum control anymore. But we started off with a couple in central Southland and just sort of spread out from there. We're currently starting to build momentum in western Southland because TV3 have just finished in the last 2 or 3 years doing possum control over there. So we're trying to maintain the gains that they put out and gave us over there from a biodiversity and biosecurity point of view. But there's a lot of areas there that could have a PCA, but it's just, yeah, you can only do so much. Thanks, Ellie. Just where to with the PCA program, obviously, as I say, we want to continue to grow the program, but we're also more often than not now, the last few years, as PCAs get established, we're talking to farmers about pest control. So talking about multi-species control, a lot of farmers out there want to target other things other than possums, particularly when the possums get low, they've got a bit more time to spend on ferrets and stoats, obviously rabbit control. They want to talk about feral cat control, hedgehogs, magpies. So yeah, where we can help farmers, we certainly do that through offering best practice advice, access to pest control materials, traps and stuff like that. So it's quite good that yeah, a lot of farmers are engaged in multi-species, not only just focusing on possums. The monitoring, obviously we want to increase the monitoring. As I indicated, the program's growing, so we also need to grow the monitoring. And that monitoring information is not only to suggest that the program's working, but we also want to know where it's not working. So equally, we're sort of spending time monitoring at a PCA level to make sure it's working and to provide that feedback to ourselves, council and farmers. But we're also doing what we call targeted monitoring. So properties that we suspect may not be doing enough or may not be doing the right thing, we're putting targeted lines on those properties. Again, it's not to beat them with a stick in a hurry. It's to give us a chance to then go back to that farmer and have another conversation about what they are doing, what else they could do, what other options there are, just to try and move them along and get some better results for them and their neighbours. As with any program, we have our issues. Now, the program's been going for 10 or 12 years now, so internally we are starting to talk about it's probably time for a program review. And some of the issues we'll be touching on is contractor availability. As the program grows, we haven't quite grown our contractor capacity enough. We've had several new contractors come on board, but for one reason or another, they've dropped off again. We've really only got the 2 established contractors that we have. They've got a good team of guys going, but we just need to build our capacity up a bit more. Complacency, no disrespect to the farmers in the room, but they're very busy people. And when possums get to a low level, there's other things to be done. So it's a matter of trying to encourage or keep that positivity going about the benefits of possum control. So that does take a bit of time as well. When I say social license, by that I mean it's not everyone's cup of tea to have poisons out in the field, and we don't want to use the amount of toxin that we perhaps do year after year. So we're always looking for alternatives, but there's not too much coming along to replenish the toolbox, if you like. And we've also got the issue of farmers who are focusing more on deer recovery, rabbits and hares for commercial reasons. So where that occurs, you cannot also have poison in the same area. So a lot of farmers are choosing to take the other wild animal income at the expense of doing possum control. So that's a challenge to our staff as well to try and get them back on board. Resourcing, yeah, again, the program's growing, so we just need to make sure we're resourcing it. I talked before about the amount of area that's dropped off the TV program. We haven't been able to capture as much as we would like. So there are, just to be bold, there are areas in Southland where possums are increasing. There's no doubt about it. It's just how we deal with those. And unfortunately, not all of Southland is conducive to the concept of a PCA, simply because some areas have a lot of possum habitat. The cost of a farmer maintaining those possum densities to low levels, might outweigh the cost. So, and another couple of issues that I haven't put on there, as you know, we've got a huge amount of Crown land in Southland. DOC aren't bound to our regional pest management plan, so it can be very hard to convince a farmer to do what he needs to do on his farm if he boundaries an extensive area of DOC land where nothing's going to get done. So that's another sort of issue. but yeah, as I say, we'll tackle all those things as we go forward, trying to do a review of the program and plus address some of those through an LTP process when it comes back around. Next slide, thanks, Ollie. This isn't PCA related, but obviously just wanted to quickly talk about one of the other programs that we've got going, which is exclusion pests in our regional pest management plan. We've got 2 animals in there, the rook and the wallaby. I just like to promote these because not everyone has seen them or knows what they are. So we have had rooks before up in Blanura, Balfour area back in the 90s. We then had them over in Western Southland, Motu Valley, Eastern Bush. But over the last 10 years, we've had them hopping across from our Otago boundary in the Kaiwera Pukerel area. So we've been keeping an eye on them over there, but we haven't had any direct reports or seen them from inspections for the last couple of years. So Otago's done a very good job on their population, got them down to very low levels. So touch wood, that's pretty much helped us out, but it's just rooks are something we're looking for, keeping an eye out. In case you didn't know, the problem with rooks is they very bad for new crops, new grass. They'll just go along in big numbers and pick it all out and damage the crop, basically. Wallabies, would like to think we're several years away from having wallabies in the region, but I don't think we should be so naive. I'm part of the National Wallaby Strategy that's looking at eradicating wallabies from New Zealand. Now, unfortunately, they've got outside their containment area of South Canterbury, so they are slowly hopping their way through Otago. And again, we hope to rely on Otago to do a good job in locating them and dealing to them there. But I think one of the other main ways that wallabies will get into Southland is people bringing them down thinking it's a good joke or a good sport to release them. So again, it's just an animal that we're keeping an eye out for. We don't have a direct budget for it, but if we do discover them in the region, we would do our utmost to deal with them straight away. I think that was me. We taking questions now, Ellie, or wait till the end?
I think wait to the end if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, that'll be fine.
Cool. So, Jolie, if you'd like to talk about plants.
Yeah, kia ora everyone. So I'm Jolie Hazley and I'm going to give the pest plants update today. So you go to the next slide, Ellie. So yeah, as Ellie said before, over the last 10 months, we've had a bit of a change in the pest plants team. I've joined the team 10 months ago. So I'm a born and bred Southlander. I'm a mother, a dance teacher, a SAR volunteer, and I'm really enjoying doing my work here at Environment Southland. I was previously at DOC doing weed control across Marahuku and including Wadding Pine work and Spartina program. We've also had Rachel Jones, who's in the top corner with her high vis on. So Rachel's joined us the first day of the August lockdown. She's a UK and New Zealand citizen, and she is brand new to Southland and absolutely loving it. But she brings with her quite an extensive background. Her English weed knowledge is being really useful over here, but she has also worked in New Zealand before. And we've got Walter Fields, who is not very photo savvy, hence the smaller photo in the corner. He's been Environment Southland summer student for 2 years previously and has a background in agriculture, contracting and environmental management studies. So yeah, we're kind of the new pest plants team and yeah, really keen to learn, build on the programs and yeah, get on with the work. So today I'm hoping to talk to you about purple loosestrife, which is one of our eradication plants that is commonly, well not common, but it is found in people's gardens currently. It was once sold in nurseries, but it's now illegal to sell it nationally. And it's not really currently growing extensively in the wild in Southland. It is more just being found in people's gardens. And often they don't know about it as it doesn't really look that weedy to them. It's a beautiful, beautiful plant when you see it mixed in with everyone else's cottage gardens and that. Over the last, I don't know, 10 or more years, we've got a total of 38 plant sites throughout Southland that we've been working on in controlling, and the control work is working really well. Each year, we usually get between 1 and 4 new plants reported coming in through the public, through communications that we're doing. However, this year we've had over a dozen potential sightings and that we are following up at the moment. Just in the last week, we've had 2 or 3, with some of them being quite extensive infestations that are in people's gardens, and yeah, they didn't know anything about it. So I guess the one good thing about this plant is that we are targeting the plant before it has the opportunity to take off and get into the wild and cause lots of issues for Southland. So it's, yeah, becoming a really good program. Next slide, Ellie. Cool. Yeah, there are a few risks or issues, I guess, with this. At the moment, we're kind of relying on tip-offs or sightings or people ringing in about the plant. Other issues are that people like the plant. They love it in the garden. And in a couple of cases we've found recently, they've been taking it with them when they've moved house. Which is leading to a little bit more investigation work. But everyone's being really helpful in everything there, so that's going well. And I guess the other thing is often people don't understand why this plant in their town garden in Windsor or Waikiwi or wherever, how this can be a problem when they see other weeds all over Southland that we should be dealing with. So it's kind of that education side of thing of nipping things in the bud before we head to. We have had a wee bit of bad publicity in the past with garden venues like wedding venues and stuff, where we've had to go in there and remove it. But yeah, doing really well there. And I guess the other thing is it is an eradication plant, trying to know about and search all its habitats when it could potentially be in a few people's gardens across Southland does have its challenges. But yeah, we've been increasing our communications and we've been offering vouchers as an incentive. And I'm not sure if any of you have seen our publicity in the last couple of weeks, but we've been putting it out on social media in the Express, getting people to phone in, and it seems to be working really well and getting these notifications in, as well as everyone getting out and looking. I know at lunchtime I went out for a bike ride, doing some lunchtime purple loosestrife surveillance in people's gardens as I biked around town. So German ivy next. Yep, thanks. So German ivy is another eradication plant that we have. We have known sites in Bluff and on Rakiura. Rakiura DOC are treating the sites over there. So Environment Southland are treating the sites down in Bluff. It's been found in people's gardens in Bluff and along the foreshore. And along the foreshore, we have been struggling to control the German ivy along there for a number of years. So a couple of years ago, a decision was made to spray the whole area, replant it, and control the German ivy in that way. So by kind of clearing the whole area, removing it all, and going back to replanting. The spraying and clearance has occurred over the last couple of years, and we've been working with the Invercargill City Council and the Bluff Hill Motupuhui Environmental Trust, who are doing a really good job in helping us and taking care of the plantings into the future. The program seems to be working really well. We've only been finding small bits of German ivy, which have been easily able to control with knapsacks or cut and paste. And hopefully this is going to be a successful way that we can eradicate the plant from Bluff along that foreshore, and as well as in people's gardens, as well as beautifying the area at the same time and making it a much nicer space for everyone. Thanks, Ellie. And then Buddleia, back to another purple plant. We've got, this is a progressive containment plant, and we're trying to keep it from escaping. It's mainly in just people's gardens at the moment, but we do have a few wild places across Southland where it has already escaped. So we've got a small one up at the Divide on the Milford Road, and one multiple sites down on the Waiau River around the Redcliffe Creek and Whare Creek area, and that's kind of our main focus. Next, Ellie. So we've got, this is a picture of the divide. So the main divide, if you look at the picture on your right, up in the, looking in the distance of that valley, that's the main divide on the Milford Road, and we're kind of sitting on the Hollyford side of it. And looking at that big, large slip that's come down off the road there, that is where a buddleia site has been sitting for a few years. You can kind of see the other pictures are showing the main road going along. The picture on the far left, you might be able to see the buddleia plant in that kind of right corner looking up at the rocks. Yes, yep, there, hanging out on the rocks there. And then the middle picture, you'll hopefully just see lots of dead sticks. But that is a buddleia that has been sprayed and killed. So for the last couple of years, there's been some aerial control work that has been completed, and it's been really successful, as the photo there shows. And we're now only starting to pick up a number of small seedlings that are popping up all over the place. So we're going with a slightly different tactic this year, which we'll see if it works. We're trying using contractors with abseiling and ropes and bits and pieces to work across the slip in some of those areas, and to go right down into the, right off some of the actual cliff areas there, cutting and pasting the seedlings and smaller plants. If this work is successful, which hopefully we'll see, and being able a really good way to be able to search the slip and get every little seedling before it has a chance to seed, we will continue with this work into the future. But as with anything, trying new things takes a few more logistics, with lots of little issues popping up, and we're pretty much ready to go. We've just got to wait on contractor availability now and the beautiful Fiordland weather, when picking a date doesn't really work with heavy rain warnings, unfortunately. So yeah, we were hoping to do it next week, but we've had to cancel it due to the weather. Next slide, please. And then the last area is the Waiau Redcliffe area and Whare Creek area. It was found a few years ago there as well. It's got challenging terrain to find the plants, as it's in overgrown river margins, which, filled with gorse and broom, a few wilding pines and bits and pieces in the river environment. So over the years, we've been doing some land and air operations using drones and helicopters and bits and pieces. So yeah, going to continue with that. There is a mix of landowners here. We've got some dockland, some forestry, neighbouring Landcorp, Land Information New Zealand and that. So there's quite a few different landowners we're working with there, but having some good conversations with them, extra eyes on the ground, which has picked up one new plant this year through the forestry, which has been great. But yeah, it definitely seems like we are stopping the spread and continuing to do control work and just further surveys to double check that it hasn't been spreading. Thanks, Ellie. And then, yeah, the future, I guess, yeah. A new team, we're bringing different perspectives, networking, ideas, and enthusiasm. We're continuing to learn, build and share more to meet the new regional pest management plan. And I guess, yeah, if everyone can keep their eyes open, I know there's a number of weeds, and I know, Lloyd, you've been very helpful in spotting plants for us. But yeah, if we can keep our eyes open, going on lunchtime walks, checking out purple loosestrife, just looking over everyone's into everyone's garden, can, you know, you never know what we might find. So thank you.
So yeah, thank you. I think through you, Mr. Chair, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Very good. I was just sitting there looking, they're all nice, beautiful flowers and fluffy little creatures, aren't they? At times, but not that we want them there. Right, have we got any questions, anybody? We've got Lloyd and Lyndall.
Dave, predator free, how does that fit in with this work? And is it connected, or is it connected well enough?
It's connected. Obviously, the PCA program fits into predator free to a certain degree. It's actually helped us achieve some potential funding from the point of view of knowing that there's already pest control or possum control happening in an area or neighbouring areas. So we've used it from a funding application point of view. But it does help, just like community groups are doing, where possum numbers are low. So it gives you a bit of a stepping board, if you like, to being able to introduce predator-free a lot easier or quicker than if there's nothing happening in the area to start with.
Okay, I'll leave it there.
Lyndall.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've got 2 or 3 things actually, so bear with me. Dave, having just been at a secondary school this morning, I'm reminded that there are a good number of young students who need career opportunities. So I would encourage us to find ways to get in touch with the training organisations and the secondary schools, so that some of those students have got we can help train up and help fill that contractor gap actually. Second thing, I'm wondering about my beloved friends in Otatara and also the Bluff area, how PCAs may or may not apply to those more urban settings, and what we can do there, because I see tremendous advantages in stopping, and it relates to Lloyd's question about the predator-free. If we can stop the possums at Otatara, there's nowhere else to go. So I just wondering what your thoughts are on that, as far as how it could be applied to the urban setting, if it can at all.
Yeah, great questions. Just touch on the first one about the school students. Yeah, great idea. And indirectly, we have sort of done that in the past, both through the summer students that come to Environment Southland, and also we do school visits as well and promote what we're doing, and hopefully something can come out of that. And we have had several calls over the last few years, people wanting to get into this industry. So I welcome and encourage them to come in and have a chat with me, so I can do it more face to face and let them take it from there. But as I say, we have had half a dozen guys sort of try and get into the market, but for one reason or another, found it wasn't as easy as they thought or as glamorous. And yeah,
it's not glamorous.
Went away and did something else. So yeah. In terms of similar to Lloyd's question about predator free, at the moment, the possum control area is targeting more rural scenarios. But we have often thought about, should we be going into the urban environment as well? But to date, we've sort of had a lot of that covered by community groups such as the Otatara Pest Busters. And really, that's probably what predator free may be looking at doing, if we can get it off the ground in that Otatara Sandy Point, connecting all the way down through Maui to Bluff, and connecting it with Rakiura. So yeah, we haven't directly gone into the urban setting with the PCA, but that's been on our radar.
David, do you got a question?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Dave, yeah, good presentation. The rabbits. Now, I'm just talking to somebody that said a station north of Gore shot 400 in one paddock. I don't know if we realise, but they're certainly building up. And I'm just wondering, particularly in some areas, probably more up in northern Southland, and really there doesn't seem to be much going on as far as obligation by landowners, particularly in some areas. I've got a block in central Otago and I know what they can do up there. So some of those dry, more extensive blocks up in this area, I think they're getting out of control. So what role can we play, or can we not play a role in that, in the way they're actually managed?
So, yeah, thanks. The rabbits are a pest in our regional pest management plan. What we do is we have an annual monitoring program, which normally kicks off around this time of the year and goes through the next 2 or 3 months, where we target a certain number of properties for monitoring, so visual field inspections. That'll be done again this year. We have probably done less the last 2 years due to COVID, but we're hoping to get that back on track. As you say, there are properties, and particularly like the northern south and along some of the riverbeds, that may have more of a problem than other people, but it's not the first time we've seen this in Southland. If we have a good breeding season like we're having this year, it's a bit drier. They do tend to bounce away, and you're seeing them at the highest population right at the moment. But one of the main differences between Southland and Otago is the climate. Now, it can be cold in Otago, but they don't get the same rainfall as we get and the long grass, it just really knocks them back come autumn and winter. So as long as we get a typical sort of season in Southland this year, then it'll knock them back. But if we get another dry winter and another dry spring on top of what we're having at the moment, then yes, we may see some problems in certain areas. Well aware that there's property just north of Gore, and we're probably talking about the same one. It's always had a problem, has a problem, and always will have a problem. It's just that type of property. It's really the only one we've issued a notice of direction on over the last sort of 15 years. But they have put in extensive rabbit-proof fencing, for example. They've got 1080 control plans, so we're sort of semi-comfortable with what they're doing. And at the moment, those rabbits are only really affecting them, not their neighbours. So that's one of the main things we evaluate as well. Is it just their problem, or are they affecting their neighbours? But yeah, we try and put out as much communications as we can coming into this time of the year, because the winter is the best time to carry out control. Shooting 400 off a paddock at the moment it sounds a lot of rabbits, but that's what you're going to get at this time of the year with all the young ones. Typically what you find is probably at least half of those 400 will be dead in two months' time anyway, due to the weather and the predators. So they would probably best to wait and concentrate their effort in another couple of months.
Oh, yeah.
Just going to ask a question in regards, obviously, the wallabies and rooks. Do we obviously we're waiting for them to come down a wee bit, or is there quite a good mute comms that it feels like, well, we should be actually helping Otago, because they're going to come eventually. We should be stopping them at the border at Otago. Obviously, I'm just trying to, is there a real good, do we actually help that, or do we just look after them once they get to their province?
We're in communications obviously a lot with the ORC and ECAN, keeping an eye on what they're doing. We drafted up a couple of response plans for both the rook and the wallaby, and that's based on a lot of the experiences and learnings from ORC and ECAN. So it is a matter of waiting until they come here, but again, the reason I sort of highlighted it is that we're not just really waiting for them. We're trying to be as vigilant as we can and making sure that we've got the networks in place and the contractors in place to help us when that time comes. But yeah, I mean, you could spend a lot of time and a lot of resource trying to track potential wallabies down. It really does rely on sighting. So through our Environment Southland Pest Hub, and MPI have got it as well, there's report of pests. So hopefully when people do think they've seen one, they can report it pretty quickly and get it through to the right people.
Yeah, obviously I live on the boundary of the Otago South, and it's not like a big fence along the boundary stops. The rabbits and everything don't stop there. That's the thing. No, that's all good.
David, they don't read signs.
No. David, you got another quick question? Oh, mute. Hang on, David. Can't hear you.
That property in the Glenure, Dave, it was our property, and in the finish, we had a high wind and it blew the nest out of the trees, so they disappeared. So I'm not quite sure how you control them, but that might be a way of doing it if you can get that to happen. But that was back in the 90s, 1990s, when that happened. Yep.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention names, though, Councillor Stevens, but yeah, the same thing happened over. Same thing happened over in the Motu Valley, and the trees that they were seeing there. While they were being sort of watched, we had high winds over there, and those blue gums were knocked or fell down, and the rocks just disappeared. Where they went to, no one knows, but we hope to think that some of them succumbed to the weather as well.
Yeah.
Lloyd Essler, one more question.
Yeah, thank you. For the full and comprehensive story about rabbits and possums, there is a very excellent book called Rabbits and Possums in New Zealand. I'll sell you a copy for $20.
Okay, thanks for that plug there, Lloyd. We'll take duly note that. Okay, could someone just results note that report? Move that. Lyndall, seconder. David, all in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right, move on to item 4. Fiona, with the Catchment Integration Division update, please. Paul or Fiona? Who was it?
Sorry, my apologies. I will just come back online. Okay, back again. Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a very short update from me, and my apologies, no pictures, but hopefully you can visualise some of this on your minds on this beautiful day. So from a catchment integration division, I wanted to just firstly provide a quick overview. So councillors will know obviously that we have a number of work programs in place, but we are looking to kind of move into a space where we think more in a Kia ora ki tai framework. So that's those 4 main geographical or catchment areas. And obviously we have to consider coastal marine and how we associate that as well. And we know, and again, councillors will know this, that we have, each area or catchment has quite a unique social, environmental and cultural considerations. And I suppose in some of the work programs we're developing up, we very much want to think about actually how we respond to those and how we work with those communities. Again, just to, I guess, comment, there is a complex, in rural Southland in particular at the moment, there are a complex range of issues facing the community. Certainly there's a number of, my staff are getting a number of comments back around the environmental challenges work that's certainly generating a huge amount of discussion. But I would say from the conversations I'm hearing, the primary concerns really are around employment issues and what I've termed harvesting, whether that be crops or whether that be removing stock off farm, but very conscious of some of those pressures that our community are under. We have got a number of new faces in our team, and I guess perhaps in the next meeting it would be a great opportunity for you to meet some of our new people. We've got quite a new team. We've got quite a comprehensive training program in place to help people come up to speed. And we know that a key part of what we do is around the relationship building. So, we've really aimed to get people who we think can get on side and work really closely both within our organisation, with our community, but also with our external stakeholders. I've termed it because I think we spend probably too much time, unfortunately, talking about COVID at the moment. For those of us working in the community, that is a real challenge. There are some constraints, obviously, around that, but I'm encouraging my team and working with the community to look for every opportunity we can. So, we've got a field day that was planned in a couple of weeks' time, and we're looking at how we use, GoPro and other technology, take these things online so that we can still capture and connect in with our community, capture the learning and the ideas, but perhaps just not in the same way that we might usually have done that work. So I've just got a couple of wee slides here. My apologies, that just go through those geographical catchment areas, so Waio and Fiordland. And this is just a very, very short summary of the work that's underway at the moment, some of it within our division, but some of it also across the organisation. So for Waio in particular, that erosion management issue is really a key piece of work that we're developing up at the moment, working with Raymond's catchment operations team in particular, how we prioritise that erosion work and importantly, how the funding happens for that work. But what I would say is, that needs to be one step in that path towards a whole of river catchment plan. So we're looking to integrate as much as we can the range of activities that happen across these areas and bring that together in one plan. We are now holding the Secretariat services for the Waio Working Party. So councillors will know that is a group that was created through the resource consent processes for Meridian for the dam, and so we have always as a council been involved with that group, but we now hold that Secretariat service. Ongoing work in the Waio Fencing Fund, that's money that comes through the Catchment Liaison Committee. Working increasingly with the Arawia group. The Arawia Catchment Group has had some renewed energy, and particularly in the sediment and erosion issue. So again, some conversations and meetings happening there. And I've just sort of highlighted, councillors will be aware that we have the Te Anau and Waio Catchment Liaison Committee meetings over the coming month. In the Aparima, key work stream for us is the ACE, the Aparima Community and Environment Project. There's a number of conversations and work streams there, and obviously we're working in with Thriving Southland, who are funding a main part of that project. Our involvement is definitely to provide that technical expertise and on-ground land management advice. So a couple of conversations, one around the farm plan requirements. So how can we work in that community? And that's always been a challenge for this project for the ACE project to lift the farm plans across the catchment, and there is very good coverage of the dairy farm plans. There's work to do in the sheep and beef or non-dairy farm plan area. At the moment, we're quite engaged in so much as we can be on stream walks. So we had a program of work that we started with ACE in Thriving Southland last year to help farmers get a better understanding of actually why it is that rivers and streams are important, and also then to link up to what good management practices or on-farm practices can actually help in terms of those issues. So most recently we had a day in the lower Aparima, and actually it was really great. We had Fish and Game attending as well, doing some electric fishing. We've had Orak Aparima representatives at a couple of the last field days, and that is, a really important cultural lens to the conversations. And we have, as I say, probably about to change in form, but a sediment trap workshop. And so we've, as part of the ACE project, there's been a number of sediment traps installed across the catchment. And the intention was to go to one of the sites and have a look at that and how it was constructed and the benefits and so forth. As I say, that will change, but certainly there will still be something happening in that space. Just specifically looking at the Potukena catchment group, you'll know that's the oldest catchment group, I think, in Southland. There's been some particular projects going on there around willow removal, and also they are working very closely with Oraka Parima representatives around Kanakana and the presence of Kanakana in the Potukena River, which has, I think, been a pretty exciting discovery, and also I guess, again, that wider learning and that connection between some of those cultural values and the cultural importance of the river, and the farmers in that catchment. There's some really important relationship building there. Not something we're directly involved in at the moment, but you'll be aware that DOC are doing some work around blackback gull habitat. That started, I suppose, with a habitat focus, but it's broadened now, I think, in a really useful way to look at how river systems perhaps are managed, benefits and issues related to that. So I think there's some really important opportunity there. Obviously,
that'll be black-billed gull.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah,
yes,
probably.
Thank you,
yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Esther. I've just put gravel ... mainly because that's Raymond's wheelhouse, and I know that he will speak of that in his later presentation. And Aparima and Waio Catchment Liaison Committee meetings, again, actually I should point out, we are attempting to work as hard as we can to hold those meetings, but again, we've put a structure in place so that if we have to go online or change the format of that, that we can. And again, just reinforce that maintaining our connection with the community in these somewhat challenging times is still incredibly important and a priority. In the Mataura and in the Waituna, again, that broader thinking about river systems. So it's very, I think, has been easy in the past for us to perhaps compartmentalise how we look after our catchments and think about our catchment areas. How do we actually bring all of that together into a more holistic kind of look? And one of the pieces of work that will come out that is being kind of discussed at the moment is the idea of Hauora planning. How do we bring the health of the whole system into one kind of overarching plan? And it's not without its challenges, but I think to achieve those outcomes we have spoken about before, it's a really important process. Councillors will know the Charlton One Mumu project continues, and that we have finished the planting for this year, which is very exciting, and have now got in a situation where we've lined up the plants for the final year. Just to acknowledge the involvement, the really important involvement of Hokanui Runanga, and the vision of Riwi England many years ago to increase the biodiversity in the corridors in the Gore area. Acknowledge the Mataura and the Waituna Catchment Liaison Committee meetings that are planned, and we've also starting to receive a number of invites to catchment group meetings. So Waikaka is one of them, to present the environmental challenges information which we're contributing to. Just to finish in Waituna, and I would very much like to acknowledge co-chair Gail Thompson, who's on this Zoom meeting today. Just really acknowledge your involvement and leadership in this project, Gail. Just of interest, and as I say, there's a number of things happening in that project, but we're working on fencing and planting subsidies and pest control work that's available through the project. It's very much in the early stages putting frameworks in place, but we're quite keen to be able to work with the community there. And just to conclude on the Oreti, so we have been, I guess we have reinvigorated and perhaps putting more structure around the work that's been happening up by the Waihopai Dam for many years in terms of the planting that's underway. We're working really closely in particular with James Hargest, and there's quite a key relationship that's been developed in work program. So that's quite significant, and we're looking to do things like signage and so forth to actually make sure that people are aware of the work that's gone there over many years. I've popped in brackets there, why restoration. I won't discuss this in too much detail at this point, but just, I guess, as early heads up, we're looking at a program that is run out of Northland, Wai Restoration, which is a collaboration between land management, biosecurity and EnviroSkills up in Northland Regional Council. And it, it allows us to, it's a program of working much more closely with secondary school students in particular, really focused on curriculum-based activities so that we can meet those needs of the schools, and also with the job opportunities in mind as well. So early days, but we are looking to whether that's something that we think would be of value for Southland. There's some work being scoped out in the Waimea Plains around constructed wetlands that we're contributing some advice to. We have a number of pieces of work going on around forestry. That remains a significant project area where we're trying to work as hard as we can around the relationship with the forestry companies, but then also around the implementation of the NES plantation forestry, and obviously working quite closely with our compliance team. Number of liaison committee meetings that have already been discussed. Between the Domes is another catchment group we work a lot with. And finally, and I've put 2 asterisks next to it just because it's a cross region rather than specific to Oreti, but we have a proactive engagement program that's about to get underway in terms of intensive winter grazing. And that's about working more closely with landowners who have forage crops in place to ensure that they understand and are working and planning towards meeting the regulations and what's expected of them once stock go on crop in the winter. And I'll conclude there. Thank you for your time.
Fiona, has anybody got some quick questions in regards to that? Silence. Oh, well, thank you, Fiona. That's all good. Someone move to resolve note the report. Read a report. Who would like to do that? David, seconder. Lyndall, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Right, move on to item 5. Thanks, Fiona. Item 5 for the catchment operations update. I'll take it. This is you, Raymond.
It is, Chair. I'll largely take the item as read. There's just a couple of points that I wanted to note. Somehow in my item, Clutha Catchment has got transposed to Clutha District. I was making a point in terms of working more closely with ORC around the fact that the Southlands River catchments feed off a very similar part of the Southern Alps that the Clutha does. And in that regard, sort of subject to a few more final approvals, looking to meet with the ORC on Monday, just as a familiarisation for the item that the point that I made in my item around us working more closely with ORC and looking to kind of share resource, I guess kind of planning for a little bit of a worst case scenario with COVID. I'm just noting too, just this morning, received a first draft of a tender document for the Stead Street pump station. It's, as you can appreciate, a fairly weighty document. So that's in a review stage at the moment. So getting close to putting that out to market. And the final point, Chair, was a meeting next Monday afternoon, Monday evening with the Milford Community Trust, and that just relates to the item around the Cledair and the discussion that we've been having with Department of Conservation around those Clearwater flood protection works, and a potential source of funding through the Milford Community Trust. That's the subject of certainly an initial conversation with the trust, as I say, next Monday evening. So happy with that, Chair, happy to take the item as read and answer any questions.
Thanks, Raymond. I have one question I'm just going to ask in the Mataura catchment section, just in regards to the, obviously, the erosion on the riverbank. And can you just clarify, it almost, I was just trying to look at how it's worded, that some of these decisions are the domain of Gore District Council. Is that our problem, or I just wanted to clarify that on page 31.
Yeah, no, Chair. So that as I note there, that was in the context of a briefing to the Mataura Community Board around the climate resilience projects, and some issues that have arisen in terms of erosion to the True Right bank, True Right Mataura Riverbank through Mataura Town. They're not substantive bank erosion issues, but clearly they are cause for concern for Gore District Council. Appreciating there's an element of judgment involved in this, but I guess from ES's perspective, I didn't see that they were issues that warranted action on our part. We're certainly happy to work with Gore District Council around that. As I understand it, that erosion at the moment is not threatening the road. There seems to be some issues around public safety, but as I politely and hopefully fairly diplomatically pointed out to a community board member, there's hundreds of kilometres of riverbank in the Southland region, and it's not necessarily ES's responsibility to go and fence that riverbank off. I mean, there's clearly some green space in Mataura, and clearly some concerns on the part of Gore District Council Parks and Reserves. But my take was that's really their domain in terms of the public safety issue.
Okay, so I'm just trying to, sorry, I just need to clarify that the Gore District Council, in regards to the erosion, we've evaluated the erosion and said, look, there's not too much of a problem there.
There's not, Chair, there's not a wider threat to the town. It's not an issue that I guess requires our intervention. As I say, the erosion is fairly small scale and fairly localised, and bearing in mind also that issues to address that in that particular context are going to run to the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. They're really issues for Gore District Council if they believe that they are an issue for their assets. We're happy to work with them and provide technical advice, but I don't believe they fit onto our radar at the present point in time.
Anybody else got any questions? David, and then Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Raymond, just really a query. As far as skimming, the gravel and obviously the build-up, are you quite happy? I mean, as a council, are we quite happy with the process of getting consent to actually do that, or are we being hamstrung there in some way? The reason why I ask is I just had it brought to my attention recently that the Tommy Gallick Bridge is almost that way, that it's got that much gravel underneath it. The water's hardly able to go underneath it. And I haven't actually had the time to go and see, but no, I'm just wondering, are we being hamstrung by a process which needs to be looked at seriously to actually go forward?
And the short answer to that is, Chair, no, we're not. I think in terms of the beneficial effect that gravel extraction can provide from a river management perspective, there's certainly support from a key stakeholder perspective for that. I guess the issues are, and they're certainly covered in my item, it's more to do at a macro level with us having a good handle on the state of the resource. And we've obviously with the Mataura started that process of building our understanding and using that data to drive some good decisions around resource allocation. In terms of the Tomagullock issue, we did, my team and I did meet with, by Zoom with Southland District Council roading staff last week, talked about that issue. That particular waterway is on the margins of our Mataura scheme. The rates that we collect are fairly low for a river management function in that area. They are certainly an order of magnitude less than the type of interventions that are required. And I guess without putting too fine a point on it, it's an SDC asset, it's their bridge. Their levels of service in terms of waterway capacity are their responsibility. We have been and will continue to work with them to find some resolutions to those issues, but they are natural processes and they will come and go over time, clearly, for whatever reason. And I'm not kind of intimately familiar with that Tomagullock catchment. The bed levels are building up at the present point in time, and they are quite right that they are losing capacity under their bridges. And as I have pointed out to them last week, Queenstown Lakes District Council, as I understand it, have a consent to extract from the Rees River to maintain capacity under the Rees River Bridge. They don't have any commercial demand to take gravel at that location, so they've realised that that's an operating cost that we're just going to have to meet in the foreseeable future to maintain waterway capacity under that bridge. I think the issue, which is a roundabout way, Chair, of saying that the issue is one of, I think, contractor interest in taking gravel from what is a relatively inaccessible location and being able to encourage demand in terms of extraction. And it might require the District Council to offer some sort of incentive to take gravel from that location.
All right, thank you for that.
Lloyd, and then Lyndall.
Is that me?
Yes, Lloyd.
Yeah. I didn't see an update on Wallistown in here. Is there an update on that bank in Wallistown and the state of that bank?
I did cover that in the item.
Yeah, I thought there was.
Did I? I didn't see it, but
so staff have done some more work on that. What the item proposes is that, and I guess it's a fairly frank assessment of workload that we have at the present point in time and the need for focus around climate resilience projects. So it really proposes that although ES has determined that it's an issue that we need to own, we perhaps park it for the next annual plan or for the LTP update. I can't really see that it's going to change particularly in terms of the severity of the issue over a year or two. And we just need to, I guess, essentially just prioritise the forward workload that we have at the moment.
On
So
page 30 under the Ariti.
Is that where it is?
Yep.
So understanding that, if we're going to go into a long-term plan, what do we need to do so we're ready to go in that long-term plan or annual plan update?
Chair, what we need to do is, and this is probably one of the challenges with the wisdom of hindsight with the climate resilience projects, is make sure that they are well scoped and that we have a robust mitigation approach that we've well costed. So essentially that we know well ahead of time with as much certainty as we can provide as to what we think the fix looks like and how much we think it might cost. I mean, as per discussions in recent weeks, we're always going to be, with that type of construction work, at the mercy of the market in terms of contractor interest and contractor perceptions around how risky the work might be, what the market is like at any given time in terms of putting that work out to tender. But as I say, the focus really needs to be on refining the design, costing that design, so we've got as much certainty as we can bring to bear on the funding that we need to address the issue.
So would that include a rating change? And if so, do we need to start that early?
I think from memory, Chair, the proposal was that the work be loan funded and repaid by way of an additional targeted rate category added to the RETI classification that encapsulates Wallistown, essentially targeted rate over Wallistown for the local share to cover the debt servicing costs. So yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. There's not a huge amount of work involved in that. Tanya and her team have done most of the work around that. It's a fairly straightforward exercise. Most of the work, and there's not a huge amount of work involved, is, as I say, doing some investigation, refining the design and costing the fix.
Okay, so I suppose I'm really just pushing to make sure that the pre-work is done. So when you go into the formal process, you're not starting from scratch. You've actually got agreements between us and SDC, and you've got a short-term fix and then a long-term rating issue that seems to be a blind spot through that area that has been solved as well.
Yeah. And Chair, if I could, I mean that is part of the work that we have planned around the way that we, I guess, fund operational activity, the capacity building project, the fact that when you have targeted rate classifications, there are gaps with the current classification. I guess this issue has highlighted a particular gap along the Makarewa, but there are other gaps as well too, and other issues, no doubt, that will kind of come along. And it's actually trying to build a funding model that has more flexibility, I guess, and that better caters for a more proactive management approach.
Thank you.
Lyndall, did you have a question? Sorry.
Yes, thanks. Two, in fact. Surprise. First one is regarding the February flood section, Raymond. Having been party to the decision to remove ourselves from the LAP, I'm wondering what your cautionary tale might be going forward, seeing as we seem to have got stuck with the insurance arrangement that we've got now. What's your cautionary tale going forward for us in that space?
Chair, I'm not sure there is a cautionary tale. ES are not alone in the decision that they made. Horizons Regional Council made exactly the same decision. Horizons haven't had similar issue to ES in terms of problems with a payout following an event, but certainly issues with the size of the bill seeming to grow inexorably over time. I'm not sure I could probably add much more than that. I guess all I could do, and Paul, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I think there's probably a need for a wider discussion, particularly if we end up hitting a bit of a brick wall with our insurer for, what's the best way of providing for this going forward. And it's not a new conversation or one that's limited to Southland. It's certainly one that other councils, as I understand it, around the country have been having as well too. I'm not sure there's any easy answer to that particularly. And again, from a Horizons perspective, LAP, particularly post Christchurch earthquake, was just unsustainable in terms of the premium increases that were occurring at the time.
Yeah, thanks. It's something we need to revisit, I guess. The other thing was the Invercargill flood protection section. Can you just help me understand how it will work if the Invercargill City Parks and Reserves take over the responsibility for the paths and the walkways? So we will still own the flood banks.
Yes.
But they will have to keep them tidy. Is that gonna be? Is it gonna work?
Chair, I think that the short answer to that is yes. And again, based on my experience in Palmerston North, where similar circumstance Horizons own all of the flood protection, were responsible for flood protection for Palmerston North, but the City Council looked after the recreational assets, all the paths and walking tracks. Worked really well, no problems with that. I think I recall when not long after I started with Horizons, there was an issue around a particular staff member getting a little bit overzealous with some maintenance of a walkway. But I think, we've got a really good working relationship with Parks and Reserves. They understand the importance of those assets. I think it will work quite well. The discussions that we've had to date have been pretty positive with Parks and Reserves. So I think it's workable. And if I can say, Chair, I mean, that is a valid issue, and it does rely on the strength of the relationship. I think it's to my mind, significantly outweighed by the importance of making sure operationally that we're focusing on the stuff that matters. And we might have been guilty, Chair, if I may, a little bit in the past of getting a little bit kind of wound up in walking tracks and bins for doggy do and other things where clearly that's maintaining those assets and getting them to do their job when they are needed is our primary focus. It just kind of helps refocus our mind and our concentration.
If there's no more questions by the looks of it, can I have someone to move to note the report? Someone put their hands up, please. There we go. Lyndall and seconder David. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Right. Against, carried. Right, move on to item 6. There you again, Raymond. Which looks like there's lots of work being done. Who's doing that?
Sorry, Chair, yes, that is me, and happy just to take that as read. There's nothing I've got to add to that item.
Have you got any questions in regards to that? No. Okay, can I move it to note that the contracts progress on works report? someone move, please? Oh,
I'll second it, but I've got a question if that's all right.
I have a mover. Who's moving?
Well,
Lyndall, sorry. Okay. Seconded, Lloyd. Yep. What do you got there, Lloyd?
Just very simply, you've got a budget, you've got some work done. Are we going to complete all the work program within the allocated time this year that you have budgeted for?
The broad answer to that, Chair, is yes. There may be elements that we are not quite able to get to, but certainly discussion last week with finance staff, we're certainly a little bit ahead of budget at the moment. So I know it's not a perfect measure, but the money is certainly flowing out the door in terms of goods and services at the moment. So yeah, I'm confident that it's broadly on track.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. So we'll move on to item 7. And Doug, you, in regards to yep, land lease districts, you.
Sorry, Chairman, we didn't vote for that.
We didn't vote, yeah.
You didn't vote, sorry. I'm busy looking for the next page, actually. Sorry, no, all in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, against, carried. Thank you for keeping an eye on me. We've got that many bits of paper here, I'm just making through. No, all good. Sorry, Doug, fire away.
Okay, well, I'd just like to talk about the 22-23 lease district budgets. I haven't really got a lot to say. As you can see, where our income is slowly increasing as we're getting rid of the discounts for good stewardship. And I'm following the guidelines by the Working Party that the works cost will be a maximum of 25% of that to be spent on things like water schemes, fencing, housings, building, and of course our reserves that we spray around the outside and anything else that we sometimes do, as in the big peat bog like out at Haslets, I sometimes spray inside because we've got a lot of gorse just close to the fence. The admin costs are literally the same as last year, with an increase in depreciation because, excuse me, we put in a new water scheme a couple of years ago on the Timpany block. And of course that's all it's going to do is increase our projected balance at the end.
Is that all you got there, Doug?
Yep.
Yeah, I've got one question, but I'll let anybody else has any questions. Lyndall?
Hi, Doug, how are you? Just wondering, looking through the property reports, it's a lot of detail, and I admire your perseverance with those, because that's really detailed. Are there any red flags? Essentially, is what I need to know at a glance. Is there, if we had a traffic light system, would any aspects of those be red?
Mr. Chairman, should we leave that question for the inspection reports?
Oh.
The next item.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes. Lloyd?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the account balance is growing. We've always discussed about access to that for other projects related directly or indirectly. Have we moved that discussion forward at all?
You're talking to me?
Yeah, I was just wondering, it's somewhere, some stage, like the budget looks fine, the expenditure totals look fine, but we are actually accumulating an asset there in cash, which is basically sitting in reserves.
I think that's obviously we've got a property working party meeting coming up, and I think it's going to have to be, we've got to really clarify some of that. Like, we've got a policy on there in surpluses and reserves, what we're allowed to, effectively it's council's funds to see fit where it goes. So it's actually having the process for people who are aware it can be, how do we get it out there, I suppose, is the question. Is that what you're asking, Lloyd?
Yeah, well, I think, can we move that to the property working? There's a couple of things that we know of that we need to address, and that's probably more appropriate, but we just need to get on that agenda so we can move on.
I'm aware of a property working group agenda being developed, which will, I assume, be populated at some point in the not too distant future. So I will clarify that as an agenda item.
Thank you.
Right, that's all good. I did have one, that one actually, no, I won't worry about it. I think it'll be better to deal with under the property working anyway. So, so in regards to that, I'm sorry, I don't get the rights, how many people on the screen here? Is there any more questions in regards? It's all pretty good there. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm happy to move that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, have we got a seconder? Oops, hang on, I'm out of, the screens are fun, aren't they? Right, it's got a seconder. Yeah, David, all in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Doug. Now you've got lease reports there, Doug.
Yes.
Which I take it is probably everybody's read, and there is obviously a question in regards to that. But if you've got anything else to give us a rundown, Doug, that'd be good.
Okay then, Mr. Chairman, I will talk about the question, but as you can see, I've gone through them and we've now brought them up to the council as I'm the regional services as I'm supposed to. I don't see any red flags as such. I have been trying, well, not trying. I have been with Nathan Cruikshank, who was part of the water and land team. We've been going out to places of interest with intensive winter grazing, talking to our lessees where we think maybe there could be issues or have in the past. And I guess we've come away that they seem to know the rules. We leave them with the rule book, so I can't really see that being too much, but I guess in the end you just never know.
Thanks for that. Does that sort of answer your question, Lyndall?
Yes, kind of, but I actually wonder if there might be a more concise way for Doug to report this to us. not expecting that detailed report doesn't happen, but that the way it comes to us might be more concise and highlight any of those issues and any of those wins, actually, because it's not all about the red, it can be about the green as well. Yeah, just I'm not sure what my fellow councillors think, or Doug would think of that, but maybe there's an easier way for him to report that to us.
I think this would be good to bring up. We'll duly note and put in that property work, because there's a bit of, we're meant to be having a manual of what's going to be done, and maybe that's also part of how the reporting's been done too. So, so Doug would need to be guided by us what we're wanting. So we need to do that. So, Paul, we should probably throw that in. We can discuss that. If that helps.
Mr. Chairman, we've got a meeting on I think it's scheduled for the 8th of March.
March, yes. So we can certainly add that there, because there is a bit of that, because Doug needs to know what we need, what we'd like to see. So we'll certainly put that on there.
Can I just ask a question of clarification, maybe for Doug? Doug, how often does this report come to regional services in this particular format?
I bring it. I have each property is visited once a year, and it's reported in whichever quarter that the system has it recorded in.
Yeah. So Councillor Ludlow, perhaps you're suggesting that there's always an annual update, but you're looking for more regular traffic light based things, you know, against a number of factors. How is the lease land management tracking? Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
If I might, Chairman, yeah, not necessarily more frequently. Depends on how valuable that is. There's no point doing it, you know, just for the sake of it having a more regular report. If it's valuable for Doug and for the Property Working Party and us to have it more regularly, then that's fine. But I just think, you know, with a risk hat on, I suppose, at a glance, we need to be able to see any of the things that are of concern or are becoming a concern, rather than all the detail of each property.
Certainly recommend it. We'll bang it on the agenda and we'll nut it out. I think that's the best way to do it. All good. Okay. Any more questions in regards to those? No. Would someone like to move the lease reports? I'm looking at 1 and 3. Yes, thank you, David. Seconder. Is that you, Lloyd?
Yeah, I can. I'm just what's running through my head, Mr. Chairman, is that this is probably more appropriate for the other committee, the Lease Land Committee, and it shows up here as a summary. But we've got a couple of pieces of land in here that is ES land in Te Anau, and I think probably that needs to be a little bit further discussion on what's happening with them.
That's something we haven't, we have duly noted in the past about under the property work.
Yeah, it's not appropriate today, but I think we need to look at that because it is mentioned in here.
Yeah. No, I think that it'll be reasonably, like I think that 8th of March meeting will, again, it's something else that we'll obviously bring up. And
I think Lyndall moved, so I'm happy to second, but that would be a comment that I think there's a little bit of extra work to be done in that area in the other committee.
Good. No, that'll be good. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right. We go on number 10. Obviously, number 10. Obviously, Phil's not here, so we don't have a Department of Conservation. I'd like to probably 11 before we go and public excluded. Obviously, just to note, we have a long-time employee leaving, and he obviously didn't want to come online and be thanked. He's obviously kept right out of the way, but I'd certainly like to move that we recognise his contribution. And I've got a bit of a letter here that I need to read out in regards to Jimmy Bent. So if you could all just sit and listen. for a bit. Jimmy Vent has worked at the Environment Southland since 1972, coming up 50 years in September. It was a pretty good innings. You can't ask much more than that. He started working for the Southland Catching Board as a surveyor as a chainman at 19 years old. There isn't a lot Jimmy hasn't been involved in when it comes to Ariti, Aparima, Waio, and Piano Basin catchments. He was the principal point of contact for every riverside landowner in those catchments and has an invaluable reputation with the majority of these people. Jimmy oversaw every gravel consent in those rivers and oversaw most of the rock quarries in the province, apart from the Matoa that supplied rock to fix damaged banks. Two major projects he was involved in his time in Environment Southland were major vegetation clearance schemes on Ariti, Aparina, Waio, and Mararoa rivers, and the constructions of hundreds of kilometres of flood banks on the Ariti, Aparima rivers following the disastrous 1984 floods. In the past 50 years, Jimmy and his contractors have been responsible for fixing the damage that occurred after every flood, every major flood. He's known for being out in the field doing his thing, and is highly thought of by all of the communities. He has had interaction in his time with Environment Southland. What he is most renowned for, though, is his ultra-dry sense of humour and depth of knowledge of river work in the region. He'll be sorely missed, and we wish him all the best for his future. And look, that's a pretty, these days to do 50 years for the job, it's an amazing feat. So we certainly do wish him well, and he obviously wants to sneak under the umbrella. He just wants to sneak away without being recognised. So, but we need to duly note that. So if someone wants to move, that we do recognise his contribution. Lyndall, someone to second that. Who wants to second that? David, that'll be good. Of his recognition, that's all good. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against, carried. No, he'll be sorely missed with that experience, but hopefully he won't be too far away to, when anything goes wrong, to ask him what's going on. The problem is. Look, we'll need to move into public excluded. So we'll